Captain Jessica Iron Jess Mitchell stood at the helm of the U.S. Horizon, her scarred hands resting on the polished command rail. The deep space exploration vessel had been her home for the past 3 years, and every inch of it reflected her philosophy: efficiency over comfort, readiness over relaxation. The crew called her Iron Jess behind her back, a nickname earned from the titanium plate in her head, a souvenir from a shuttle crash that should have killed her. Contact bearing 347 Mark II. Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the sensor station, his voice carrying that slight edge that Mitchell had learned to recognize. Something weird was out there. On screen, she ordered, watching as the main viewport shifted to show something that shouldn't exist. The vessel, if you could call it that, resembled a massive crystalline structure, its surfaces refracting starlight in impossible patterns. It wasn't built. It looked grown, like some vast geometric flower blooming in the void. Beautiful, but wrong in a way that made Mitchell's titanium plate itch. Size comparison, she asked, maintaining her calm despite the murmurs spreading across the bridge. It's massive, Captain. Roughly 3 kilometers in length. No visible propulsion systems, but it's definitely moving under power. Energy readings are off the charts, but they don't match any known signatures. Mitchell nodded, years of training kicking in. Standard first contact protocols. Begin broadcasting on all frequencies. Universal greeting package. The screaming started in communications first. Ensign Parker clutched her head, ripping off her headset as she collapsed. Across the bridge, crew members began grabbing their temples, faces contorted in pain. Rodriguez fell next, then navigation, then. But Mitchell felt nothing, just the familiar dull ache where metal met bone in her skull. Medical to the bridge. She snapped into her comm, but the response was garbled, screams echoing through the ship's channels. Whatever was happening, it wasn't isolated to the bridge. The crystalline ship was closer now, somehow moving without seeming to move at all. Its faceted surface rippled, and Mitchell saw something emerging. Geometric shapes arranging themselves into vaguely humanoid forms. Security teams to all decks, she ordered, but the security chief was already down, writhing on the deck plates. Mitchell grabbed his sidearm, checking the charge. Standard protocols were clearly no longer applicable. The ship-wide comm crackled. A voice that wasn't a voice filled the air, like the sound of grinding crystals forming words. Asterisk primitive organic vessels. Su bigana tu ko and su ampijan. Resistancy is ARRELEVA asterisk. Like hell, Mitchell muttered, feeling oddly clear-headed while her crew suffered around her. The neural dampeners in her titanium plate, installed to prevent seizures after her accident, must have been blocking whatever psychic attack the crystals were using. She needed a plan. Fast. The crystalline beings were boarding now, appearing through walls as if solid matter meant nothing to them. They were beautiful and terrible. Towers of living crystal that moved with deadly grace. Where they touched unconscious crew members, the crystals began to glow with an inner light. They were feeding, consuming consciousness itself. Mitchell hadn't survived a shuttle explosion, months of rehabilitation, and countless doubters trying to ground her just to watch her crew become alien food. She reached for the environmental controls, remembering a physics lecture from her academy days about crystalline structures and resonant frequencies. Computer, access ship's emergency transponder. Reverse polarity and broadcast on all frequencies at maximum power. Asterisk warning. Requested action. While XCED safe operating PARA METERS asterisk. Override safety protocols. Authorization Mitchell, Alpha 79. Execute. The ship's speakers screamed. Not with voices this time, but with a pure tone that made Mitchell's artificial tooth fillings vibrate. The crystalline borders stopped mid-stride, their surfaces trembling. One shattered, then another. Then, asterisk impossible. Organics, cannot. Asterisk. The voice died as its source began to crack. Geometric perfection, splintering under sound waves, never meant to be weaponized this way. Mitchell watched as the alien crystals either retreated or shattered, leaving behind only glittering dust where they'd stood. Across the bridge, her crew began to stir, groaning but alive. Medical teams were finally arriving, looking dazed but determined. "Damage report," Mitchell called out, already thinking ahead to the paperwork this would generate. First contact protocols didn't usually involve shattering the other side. But then, humanity had never been good at following the expected script. And Captain Jessica Mitchell had never been good at losing. The crystalline ship was retreating now, its perfect surface marred by spreading cracks. Humanity's first encounter with the Nexeri had lasted less than 15 minutes. It wouldn't be the last. Admiral James Cooper had seen his share of strange sights during his 30-year career in the Space Force, but nothing quite prepared him for the menagerie of alien diplomats crowding Sol Station's primary conference chamber. 17 species, each more bizarre than the last, all demanding an emergency audience. The Xylaxians, with their time-phased bodies flickering in and out of reality. The amorphous Mist Collective, swirling anxiously in their containment fields. Even the machine logic Quanticons had sent an emissary, their crystalline data core pulsing with urgent patterns. "Let me be clear," Cooper said, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic recordings playing above the conference table. "You're saying these Nexeri have eliminated entire civilizations, and we just picked a fight with them." The Xylaxian ambassador's form stabilized momentarily. "Not civilizations, Admiral. Species. 47 confirmed extinctions. The Nexeri don't leave survivors." Cooper watched the footage again. A crystalline dreadnought, larger than anything humanity had yet built, systematically destroying a planet's orbital defenses. The defenders' weapons seemed to pass harmlessly through the crystalline hull, while return fire shattered ships into atomic debris. The Verdant Collective lasted longest. The Mist representative whispered, their vaporous form dimming with remembered grief. 3 years of resistance, billions of minds absorbed into the Nexeri matrix. We stopped counting the dead. But Cooper wasn't watching the destruction anymore. He was watching the tactics. Every species fought alone. Every defense was purely reactive. Nobody had tried to. "Admiral," his aide interrupted, handing him a priority message. "The Nexeri have hit 3 outposts in the past hour. No survivors." The chamber erupted in panic. The Xylaxian ambassador's form scattered across multiple time frames. The Mist Collective's containment field rippled with distress patterns. "They never strike this quickly." The Quanticon emissary's mechanical voice carried an unfamiliar note. "Fear. Your Captain Mitchell's defense must have accelerated their hunting protocols." Cooper stood, his chair scraping against the deck. The sound cut through the chaos like a gunshot. "Tell me," he said quietly, but with enough authority to silence the chamber, "in all these records, has anyone ever tried fighting back? Not just defending, but actually taking the fight to them." The silence was answer enough. "Has anyone ever tried working together?" The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances, or their species equivalent of them. Cooper tapped his datapad, bringing up the footage of the U.S. Horizons encounter. Captain Mitchell discovered their vulnerability to specific resonance frequencies by accident. "Imagine what we could learn if we combined your species' knowledge with our, let's call it, unique approach to problem solving." "Impossible," the Quanticon stated. The Nexeri would detect any large-scale alliance through their psychic network. They would strike before. "Unless," Cooper interrupted, a plan forming. "We make our official response exactly what they expect. Public isolation. Apparent panic. Meanwhile," he turned to his aide, "get me a secure channel to Captain Mitchell. Then I want deniable back channels established with every species represented here. Focus on survivors, refugees, anyone with direct combat experience against the Nexeri." "Admiral," the Xylaxian flickered anxiously, "what you're suggesting is exactly what humanity does best," Cooper finished. We adapt, we improvise, and we're really good at looking like we're doing one thing while we're actually doing another. His datapad chimed again. More attacks. The Nexeri were probing human defenses, testing responses, learning patterns. But they were learning the wrong patterns. Ladies, gentlemen, and assembled beings, Cooper addressed the chamber. Officially, this meeting never happened. Officially, humanity will face this threat alone, probably to our doom. Unofficially, he smiled, the same smile that had terrified Academy cadets for decades. We're going to teach these crystal bastards why you should never corner a species that turned spite into an art form. As the aliens filed out, some through the door, some through other dimensional spaces, Cooper watched the tactical display updating with new Nexeri positions. They were following standard hunting patterns, just like they had 47 times before. But humanity had never been good at following patterns. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was turning hunters into prey. The real question was, how many of humanity's new unofficial allies would be brave enough to help when the time came? Based on the fear he'd seen today, Cooper suspected the answer was more than anyone expected. Sometimes, all people needed, human or alien, was someone crazy enough to throw the first punch. And humanity, well, throwing first punches was practically a species pastime. Colonel Derek, Mad Dog, Martinez stood in New Montana's central mining control, watching holographic displays track the approaching Nexeri fleet. His Marines had spent 3 weeks turning the colony into history's most elaborate death trap, and he'd be damned if he'd evacuate before seeing it in action. Last civilian transport just cleared atmosphere. Sir, Lieutenant Walsh reported, her fingers dancing across multiple control panels. Shall we initiate Protocol Raccoon? Martinez grinned. His reputation for insane battle strategies had earned him his nickname long before this assignment. You know why raccoons are so dangerous, Lieutenant? Because they're smarter than they look and mean as hell, sir. Because they'll use anything as a weapon. He keyed the command sequence. Initiate Protocol Raccoon. Let's show these crystal bastards how we fight dirty. Across the colony, carefully staged emergency beacons activated, broadcasting panic and chaos on all frequencies. Automated distress calls painted a picture of a disorganized evacuation still in progress. The bait was set. The Nexeri fleet, 5 crystalline dreadnoughts resembling abstract geometric sculptures, descended through the atmosphere exactly where Martinez predicted. Their arrogance was their weakness. 3 weeks of probing attacks had revealed their rigid tactical doctrine. They're parsing our fake transmissions, Walsh reported. Taking the bait. Ground forces deploying. Sir, they're heading straight for the primary mining complex. Martinez watched the crystalline warriors materialize throughout the colony, their translucent forms distorting light like living prisms. They moved with predatory grace, expecting to find scattered, helpless prey. Instead, they found emptiness. Fun fact about New Montana, Martinez said conversationally, though his hands were tight on the control panel. Planet's got the highest concentration of piezoelectric crystals in colonized space. Great for energy production. Not so great if someone, say, reverses the entire power grid's polarity. Walsh's eyes widened. The whole planet's one big resonance chamber. Phase 1. Martinez ordered. Light 'em up. The trap was elegant in its brutality. Every mining charge in the colony's northern quadrant detonated simultaneously, creating a seismic wave that propagated through the planet's crystalline substrate. The Nexeri warriors, their own crystalline forms, suddenly in harmony with the planet itself, began to vibrate. But they didn't shatter. Not yet. Phase 2, Martinez barked. Give him the bass drop. Sonic disruptors, disguised as standard mining equipment and scattered throughout the colony, activated on a frequency matched precisely to the Nexeri's crystalline structure. The effect was instantaneous. Geometric perfection fractured. Living crystal splintered. The Nexeri fought back, their ships launching energy weapons that cut through buildings like paper. But Martinez had planned for this too. Released the Shattercrabs. Hundreds of small, crab-like robots emerged from hidden bunkers, each armed with a miniaturized sonic emitter. They swarmed the Nexeri forces, attacking from angles the rigid-thinking crystalline warriors never anticipated. Where Nexeri weapons destroyed one, 3 more would emerge from the debris, turning destroyed infrastructure into impromptu cover. "Sir," Walsh's voice carried urgency. "They're adapting, changing their crystalline frequency. Then it's time for Phase 3. Martinez's grin turned feral. "Initiate total grid overload. Burn everything." The colony's power grid, already stressed from the sonic attacks, began to fail spectacularly. But each failure was choreographed, each explosion precisely calculated. The chain reaction traveled through the piezoelectric crystals in the planet's crust, turning the entire battlefield into a weapon. The Nexeri never stood a chance. Their rigid battle doctrine couldn't adapt to an enemy that turned chaos itself into a strategy. Their perfect crystalline forms shattered under attacks coming from everywhere and nowhere. When the dust settled, the colony was in ruins, but amid the destruction, Martinez's command center remained intact, shielded by the very geological features that made his trap possible. "Damage assessment," he asked, though he already knew the cost. "Colony's a total loss, sir," Walsh reported grimly. "But Nexeri casualties, they're off the charts. We got all 5 dreadnoughts and at least 2,000 ground forces. No survivors detected." Martinez nodded, watching the glittering dust that had once been the galaxy's apex predator scatter in the wind. The colony could be rebuilt. The message they'd sent today was worth far more. "Send word to Admiral Cooper," he ordered. "Tell him the raccoons just took down the wolves. And we're just getting started." Humanity had proven they could do more than just survive against the Nexeri. They could win. And they could do it by breaking every rule of conventional warfare. The galaxy's deadliest species was about to learn why humans had survived countless extinction events on Earth. Sometimes, the most dangerous animal isn't the biggest or strongest. It's the one crazy enough to blow up its own home to win a fight. Dr. Amanda Blackwood's laboratory in the Pentagon's Nexeri Task Force Wing looked more like a meditation retreat gone wrong than a military research facility. Crystalline shards from fallen Nexeri warriors hung suspended in containment fields, while a dozen volunteers sat in modified MRI machines, their brainwave patterns dancing across holographic displays. "Play it again," she ordered, rubbing her temples. 3 days without sleep was pushing it, but she was close to something. Something big. The recording started. A Nexeri attack on a civilian transport. Crew members collapsed one by one as crystalline warriors phased through the hull, their telepathic assault overwhelming each victim. Except. Freeze frame. Blackwood leaned forward, studying the brainwave patterns. "Show me Subject 7's neural activity during the attack." The hologram zoomed in on a chaotic mess of contradicting signals. Fear and courage, fight and flight, logic and instinct, all firing simultaneously. A normal human mind under stress. Now overlay the Nexeri telepathic frequency. The crystal in the nearest containment field hummed, emitting the same psychic resonance that had dominated so many alien species. But when it hit the human brainwave pattern, "It's not that we're resistant," Blackwood whispered, finally understanding. "We're incomprehensible." Care to explain that to those of us without PhDs in synapsecology? General Richards had entered silently, making Blackwood jump. She gestured to the displays. "Look at the Zalaxian brain patterns we got from our allies, or the Mist Collective's group consciousness. Every species the Nexeri successfully dominated shows organized, predictable neural activity. Their thoughts flow in patterns the Nexeri can disrupt." "And humans?" Blackwood laughed. "We're chaos incarnate. Our minds run a dozen contradicting processes simultaneously. We feel fear and charge forward anyway. We know something's impossible but try it regardless. The Nexari telepathy tries to impose order on our thoughts, but it's like trying to organize a tornado. Richard studied the displays. So we're winning because we're mentally unstable. We're winning because we're human. Blackwood pulled up Captain Mitchell's brain scans from the first encounter. When Mitchell faced them, she was terrified and calculating victory and worried about her crew and planning dinner. The Nexari couldn't process it. Their crystalline computing can't handle that level of cognitive dissonance. She moved to the central containment field, where the largest Nexari shard pulsed with dim light. They're perfect crystals, General. Every facet aligned, every thought structured. But that perfection is their weakness. They literally cannot comprehend how we think. Can we weaponize this? Blackwood's grin matched Martinez's from the New Montana battle. Already have. Meet the Mindstorm projector. She gestured to what looked like a modified satellite dish. It amplifies human brainwave patterns and broadcasts them directly into Nexari crystalline matrices. Imagine forcing a computer to divide by zero, but worse. Effects. She activated the device. The Nexari crystal in containment began to vibrate, its perfect surfaces developing microscopic fractures as it tried to process the chaotic human thoughts bombarding it. Total systemic failure. Their crystalline minds shatter trying to impose order on human chaos. Even better. She deactivated the device. It only affects Nexari. Other species' brains aren't structured to resonate with the signal. Richards watched the crystal slowly stabilize. Mass production. Already designing portable units. Every ship, every soldier can become a psychic weapon. The Nexari's greatest advantage just became their critical weakness. Outstanding work, Doctor. Richards turned to leave, then paused. One question. Why were you thinking about dinner during first contact with an alien species? Blackwood shrugged. Because I was hungry, terrified, calculating shield frequencies, and wondering if my cat had eaten yet. That's just how human minds work. We don't make sense. And that's what makes us dangerous, Richards finished, finally understanding. Exactly. Blackwood turned back to her displays, already planning improvements. The galaxy's apex predators just discovered they're not the scariest thing out here. Turns out, the most dangerous species isn't the one with the most perfect mind. She watched the Mindstorm projector's readings with satisfaction. It's the ones whose minds are perfectly imperfect. The ones who can feel absolute terror and still make jokes. The ones who can face extinction and worry about their pets. The ones, she concluded, who turned mental chaos into an evolutionary advantage. Because sometimes, the best weapon against perfect order isn't better order. It's humanity's gift for embracing the chaos that makes us who we are. Fleet Commander Marcus "Thunder" Thompson watched the tactical display as the largest battle in human history unfolded around Proxima Centauri. 2,000 human ships against a Nexari armada 3 times that size. The crystalline dreadnoughts filled local space like a geometric constellation, beautiful and deadly. They're not even trying to negotiate, his XO, Commander Sarah Hayes, noted grimly. This is their full commitment. Good. Thompson's scared face reflected the red light of Proxima. That means they're scared. The Nexari struck first, their crystalline ships firing energy weapons that could slice through battleship armor like tissue paper. But humanity had learned from every previous engagement. The fleet split into predetermined squadrons, executing maneuvers that looked like chaos, but followed Thompson's carefully orchestrated shatter fleet strategy. Mindstorm projectors at full power, Hayes reported. All ships broadcasting on calculated frequencies. The human fleet's formation wasn't meant to be stable. It was designed to fall apart. Execute Pattern Thunder 1, Thompson ordered. Let's show them why they should have brought more ships. The outer layer of human vessels charged straight at the Nexari line. Suicidal, by conventional tactics. But as the crystalline ships fired, the human vessels didn't try to dodge. They took hits deliberately, their reactors going critical in calculated sequences. Sir, Hayes's voice carried urgency. We're losing ships faster than projected. No, Thompson corrected, watching his plan unfold. We're using them exactly as planned. Each dying human ship detonated in a precisely calculated explosion, their mindstorm projectors overloading at the moment of destruction. The resulting waves of chaotic human thought patterns cascaded through space, amplified by the ship's death throes. Where they hit Nexari vessels, the perfect crystalline structures began to fracture. Second wave. Execute Pattern Thunder 2, Thompson ordered. Push through the gaps. Smaller, faster ships darted through the holes in the Nexari formation, their sonic resonators targeting already stressed crystal structures. The enemy fleet's geometric perfection began to break down as ships shattered or tried to retreat, only to find their escape routes blocked by more human vessels broadcasting mindstorm frequencies. Sir, the Nexari are adapting. Hayes pointed to a group of crystalline ships altering their structure to resist the sonic attacks. They're learning. Thompson smiled. Then it's time for Thunder 3. Signal the Mist Collective vessels. From behind Proxima's stellar corona, where they'd been hiding their energy signatures, the alien allies Admiral Cooper had secretly assembled made their move. Mist Collective ships, invisible to Nexari sensors, delivered their payload. Swarms of Martinez's upgraded shattercrabs, now equipped with miniaturized mindstorm projectors. The battle devolved into beautiful chaos. Human ships, dying by the hundreds, each took dozens of Nexari vessels with them. The shattercrabs overwhelmed crystalline defenses, their seemingly random attacks following patterns too complex for the rigid Nexari tactical computers to predict. Casualties at 60%, Hayes reported, her voice steady despite the cost. But Nexari losses. Sir, they're attempting to retreat. Not yet. Thompson opened a fleet-wide channel. All surviving ships. Execute Final Thunder. For Earth. The remaining human vessels activated their secret weapon. Quantum-entangled sonic resonators synchronized across the entire battlefield. The overlapping frequencies created a symphony of destruction, each note calculated to exploit the crystalline warrior's structural weaknesses. The Nexari fleet, trapped between waves of human chaos thought and physically destructive harmonics, began to break apart. Their perfect formations shattered like crystal champagne flutes in an earthquake. When it was over, the space around Proxima Centauri glittered with crystalline debris from both sides. Out of 2,000 human ships, barely 400 remained operational. But of the Nexari armada, no survivors detected, Hayes reported quietly. The largest crystalline fragments are smaller than a shuttle. Thompson nodded, feeling the weight of victory and its cost. Send word to Earth. Tell them. He paused, watching the glittering field of debris. Tell them Thunder's gambit worked. The Nexari just learned that humanity doesn't play by their rules. Because in the end, the galaxy's deadliest species had made a crucial mistake. They assumed that humans, like every species before them, would try to survive at any cost. They never considered that humans would sacrifice everything to win. That's why they lost. Because sometimes victory doesn't go to the strongest or the most numerous. It goes to those willing to ride their burning ships straight into the heart of the enemy, broadcasting their chaotic thoughts like a weapon, turning their very deaths into one final, perfect shot. Dr. Jack Reynolds wasn't what anyone expected from Earth's leading xenobiologist. His lab coat was decorated with cartoon DNA helixes. His hair looked like it had survived an explosion. It had, twice. And he was currently talking to a crystalline shard, like it was a misbehaving puppy. Come on, beautiful, he coaxed, adjusting sensors around the Nexari fragment recovered from the Proxima battle. Show me what makes you tick. What turned you from space jewelry into space Jeffrey Dahmer? Doctor, his AI assistant AI chimed in, comparing genocidal aliens to serial killer scenes. Inappropriate, maybe, but accurate. He pointed to new readings appearing on his holographic display. Every species has evolutionary impulses: survival, reproduction. The Nexari's appetite for consciousness doesn't fit any natural pattern. It's like they're... He paused, eyes widening. Holy shit. Araya, show me their structural decay rate over time. The AI compiled data from hundreds of samples. A pattern emerged, one that made Reynolds drop his ever-present coffee mug. Get me Captain Mitchell. Now. Jessica Iron Jess Mitchell stood in Reynolds' chaos of a laboratory 30 minutes later, watching the eccentric scientist practically vibrate with excitement. They're dying, Reynolds explained, pointing to complex molecular diagrams. All of them. Their entire species. Look at these decay patterns in their crystalline matrix. Mitchell studied the displays. After the Proxima battle, she'd been promoted to Task Force Commander, leading the final push toward the Nexari homeworld. This had better be worth delaying the offensive. Explain it like I'm not a crazy scientist, she ordered. Reynolds grinned manically. Okay, imagine you're a perfect crystalline being. Absolute geometric harmony. Then some massive stellar event, probably their sun going weird a few million years ago, introduces a flaw into your matrix. Tiny at first, but it spreads. Generation after generation, your species is literally falling apart at the molecular level. What does this have to do with them consuming other species? Everything. He pulled up images of Nexari crystals, before and after consciousness absorption. They're not eating consciousness for fun. They're using absorbed minds to temporarily stabilize their degrading matrix. Each consumption buys them more time. But, he pointed to decay rates. It's accelerating. They need more and more minds to maintain stability. Mitchell's artificial plate tingled as implications hit her. They're not evil. They're desperate. Exactly. They're like crystal addicts, but the drug is consciousness itself. And like any addiction, Reynolds pulled up projections. It's killing them faster than the original problem. Can it be fixed? That's the beautiful part. Reynolds practically danced to another display. Their basic crystalline structure is actually simple, with the right resonance frequency, not to shatter them, but to realign their matrix. We could theoretically cure their entire species. Mitchell's tactical mind raced. The same technology we're using to destroy them could save them. Talk about beating swords into plowshares. We'd need something massive, powerful enough to affect their entire homeworld. But, like the quantum-entangled sonic resonator network we're building for the final assault, Mitchell finished. We designed it to shatter their planet. Could we reprogram it? Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. The Nexari aren't naturally violent. They're sick. Dying. Every atrocity they've committed was driven by desperation to survive. If we cure them, we end the war without genocide, Mitchell said softly. But if we're wrong, then humanity still has the biggest gun ever built pointed at their homeworld. Reynolds shrugged. We just get to choose whether to pull the trigger or offer the cure. Mitchell touched her titanium plate, remembering the minds she felt dying during that first contact. Get me proof. Real, solid evidence that this will work. I'll take it to Admiral Cooper, but the families of everyone who died fighting them will need to understand why we're showing mercy to monsters. She turned to leave, then paused. How did you even think to look for this? Reynolds smiled sadly. Because they're too perfect. Natural evolution is messy. Imperfect. Like humans. When I saw something that geometrically precise, I knew either they engineered themselves into a corner or something broke their perfection. Turned out to be both. Mitchell nodded. Keep working. And Reynolds, if you're right, you just changed everything. That's what science is for, he called after her. Changing the impossible into the inevitable. He turned back to his samples, humming happily. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from studying an enemy's strengths, but from understanding their deepest fears. And nothing, it seemed, terrified the perfect crystalline Nexari more than their own imperfection. Lieutenant Emma, Ghost, Walker moved through the crystalline corridors of the Nexari hive like a shadow, her specialized stealth suit bending light around her team. The massive resonance device strapped to her back felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, probably because it carried the fate of an entire species. "This is insane," Sergeant Chen whispered through their neural comm. "We're inside the belly of the beast, carrying either salvation or apocalypse, and Command still can't decide which button we're pushing." "Above our pay grade, Sarge," Walker responded, checking their position on the 3D map Reynolds' team had somehow extracted from captured Nexari tech. "We just plant the package and wait for orders." The hive's interior was beautiful in a terrifying way. Geometric patterns that shouldn't exist in nature flowed around them, every surface humming with trapped consciousness. The stolen minds of 47 species, all powering this massive crystalline computer. "Movement ahead," Private Rodriguez warned. "Big ones." 2 Nexari warriors phased through a nearby wall, their crystalline forms more intricate than any they'd encountered before. These weren't soldiers. They were something else. The aliens stopped, their faceted heads turning directly toward Walker's cloaked team. Organic life, DTCTE. Primitive. Inefficient. The telepathic assault hit like a hammer, but Dr. Blackwood's neural shields held. What didn't hold was their stealth tech. The Nexari's scanning beam had disrupted it. Well, shit. Walker drew her sonic pistol. Plan B. The firefight was brief and brutal. Sonic weapons met crystalline energy beams. 2 more of Walker's team went down before Rodriguez's perfectly placed shot shattered one warrior. But the other one was protecting something. Through the breach in the wall, Walker saw them. Smaller crystalline forms, their structures simpler, purer. "Holy hell," she breathed. "They're children." The remaining warrior's next telepathic broadcast was different. Not hostile. Desperate. Protect. Preserve. The young ones DT or IRAFS dare. Walker made a split-second decision that would either save or doom the mission. She lowered her weapon. "We're not here to destroy them," she broadcast mentally, thanking God for Blackwood's neural transmitters. "We're here to help." The warrior's crystalline surface rippled with conflicting patterns. Deception. Humans bring destruction. Walker pulled the resonance device from her back, letting the warrior scan it. "This can cure the degradation. Your entire species. No more need to consume others." "Impossible. Perfection cannot be restored." "Perfection is overrated," Walker said, thinking of Earth's messy, chaotic evolution. "Sometimes the flaws make us stronger." A smaller crystal, one of the children, moved forward despite the warrior's attempt to block it. Its surface was already showing signs of decay. Reynolds was right. The young ones were deteriorating faster. The child touched the resonance device. Its surface briefly aligned with the test frequency, and for a moment, its decay visibly halted. The warrior's stance changed. You would save those who consumed your ALLIES. We would save those who had no choice, Walker answered. Humanity's weird like that. More crystalline forms were gathering now. Warriors, children, workers, an entire hive's worth. Walker's team raised their weapons, but she waved them down. The first warrior stepped forward. We will guide you to the core. If you DCEIVUS, your D8th, what will be ETRNAL*. Fair enough. Walker hefted the device. Sergeant, call it in. Tell command we're going for the cure. And tell them to hurry up and decide, because I just bet my entire team's lives on humanity's better nature. As they moved deeper into the hive, guided by their former enemies, Walker couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. They'd come to deliver either salvation or extinction, and the choice had been made not by admirals or politicians, but by a soldier's split-second call and a child's trust. Hey, Sarge, she whispered as they approached the massive core chamber. If we survive this, drinks are on me. Ghost, Chen replied. If we survive this, Drinks are on the entire damn species we just saved. The core chamber doors opened, revealing a vast crystalline heart pulsing with millions of captured consciousness. Soon, they'd either free every trapped mind and save the Nexari, or Walker pushed that thought aside. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't fighting to the death. Sometimes it was choosing to believe in redemption, even when facing the galaxy's deadliest species. Captain Jessica Iron Jess Mitchell stood on the bridge of the U.S. horizon, watching the combined human fleet surround the crystalline homeworld. The same ship that made first contact would now deliver final judgment. Poetic, if you could ignore the weight of billions of lives hanging on their next decision. Ghost Team reports device planted in the core. Commander Hayes relayed. Awaiting final code sequence. Admiral Cooper's hologram flickered beside Mitchell's command chair. The council is split. Half want revenge, half want redemption. He paused. It's your call, Captain. You met them first. You end this. Mitchell touched her titanium plate, remembering that first contact. The screaming minds. The terror. But now she understood. It wasn't malice she'd felt, but desperation. Pain. Lieutenant Walker, she called through the quantum comm. What do you see down there? Walker's voice came back clear, though tired. They're not fighting anymore, Captain. The children, they're showing signs of complete matrix failure. Whatever we do it now. Commander Thompson, status of the fleet. Shatterfleet in position. One word, and we end the Nexari threat forever. Mitchell closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 47 extinct species demanding justice. But then she remembered something her flight instructor said after her crash. The true test isn't whether you can take a life. It's whether you can save one when everyone expects vengeance. Ghost Team, initiate salvation protocols. Full power to the resonance device. The crystalline planet's surface began to glow as quantum-entangled frequencies propagated through its structure. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then everything happened at once. The captured consciousness began releasing, billions of minds freed from their crystal prison. The Nexari's perfect geometric patterns shifted, realigned, healed. And through it all, a telepathic broadcast so powerful it reached every ship in the fleet. We are meant MBR, who we were. Before the Hungier. Before the pain. We are meant MBR. Peace. Energy readings are off the scale, Hayes reported. But the pattern. Captain. They're stabilizing. Through the viewport, Mitchell watched the crystalline world transform. The harsh, jagged geometries softened, becoming something new. Not perfect, but stronger, like a broken bone that heals harder at the fracture point. Ghost Team, report. Walker's laugh carried equal parts exhaustion and awe. It worked, Captain. The children. Their decay is reversing. The whole damned species is healing. And sir, they're crying. I didn't even know crystals could cry. The Nexari's next broadcast reached not just the fleet, but every species who had suffered under their reign of terror. We OFFER, restoration, rehabilitation. The consumed QONSCIOUs as an ESS can be RE2RN'd. Not all, but many. We who ULD man AKAMNDs. Admiral Cooper's hologram smiled. Well, Captain, still think humanity made the right call. Mitchell watched as the first rescued minds were transferred to waiting medical ships. Thousands of lost souls, thought gone forever, getting a second chance. Ask me again in a century, but for now. She gestured to the transformed crystalline world below. I think we just proved why humanity's chaos sometimes beats perfect order. Mom, Hayes called out. The Nexari are transmitting something else. Star charts. Hundreds of them. And warnings. Warnings about what? Asterisk, the great Hungier Commons. Asterisk, the Nexari broadcast. Asterisk, we felt it. NTAE spaces between Kion and CIOUs SNESS. Something vast, ancient, hungry. We Goyodi stand with humanity against the ADARK*. Mitchell exchanged looks with Cooper. Another threat, bigger than the Nexari. But this time, they'd face it with allies who understood both perfection and flaws. Order and chaos. The strength found in healing rather than hatred. Send word to Earth, she ordered. Tell them the galaxy's deadliest species just became humanity's strongest ally. And then, she smiled. Tell Lieutenant Walker she owes the entire species a drink. Because in the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating the Nexari. It was showing the galaxy that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't a gun or a bomb, or even a sonic resonator. Sometimes it's the simple choice to heal rather than hurt, to understand rather than destroy, to look at the galaxy's most feared predator and see not a monster, but a patient. That's what made humans different. Not our capacity for violence, but our capacity for mercy. Even if that mercy came with a side of chaos, a dash of insanity, and the distinct possibility that the next threat would make the Nexari look like a warm-up act. But that, as they say, is a story for another day.